prepared to do a 10-minute intro and then obsess on Pigford. And I guess I got diverted with my funny bone, and I was like, oh, I'm amusing myself right now, so I just kept going with the Bardrick thing, and I'm kind of happy with it because, I don't know, I like being goofy, and I think that CPAC needs a little bit of levity, and I wanted to remind Eric Bollard and John Podesta that I'm still here, and that I'm still trying to get more warriors to join the cause to take down the institutional left. I hope that that message was clear throughout the little attempts at comedy. So I'm kind of happy, but I'd really like for everybody to start taking seriously the gravity of the Pigford story, because I knew from the very beginning when I started to break this story 7 months ago, when we started what has been an exhaustive research session, series of sessions, and then in which I hired Lee Stranahan from the Huffington Post, knowing that the media wasn't going to cover a story that had such explosive ramifications, coming from the right-wing guy who was associated with Shirley Sherrod's firing. I said, how on God's green earth do I reinsert this narrative in which we get back into the facts of the case and get back into why for 4 weeks I was attacked by the institutional left. 4 weeks. 2 days would have worked, but it was a mechanism by which they could divert attention away from Obama's culpability on why he fired her without her due process. The day that it happened, I thought I had struck the bullseye, because she apologized, the NAACP apologized for the audience's reaction, which was my point, and Shirley Sherrod blamed the NAACP for the entire situation. Next thing I know, I'm being pummeled. It became 4 weeks of it, while at the same time my entire email inbox was filled with hundreds of emails from people saying, this is about Pigford, this is about Pigford. I had never heard of Pigford in my entire life, and I really didn't address it until a couple weeks later. But people started to point out to me, did you see Lawrence O'Donnell's show on Wednesday? She was fired on Monday. It was a day in which I was traveling across the country, and I thought everything was fine. It shut up the NAACP, which had been attacking the Tea Party relentlessly. I was like, wow, this is great. I went on Hannity, I think, on Monday night, and by the time I woke up the next day, I was under utter assault. By Wednesday, Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC was talking about something that I don't think anybody in the room or I would understand what he was talking about. He said that the Pigford settlement money of $1.15 billion was potentially going to be taken out of a supplementary war funding bill. What better place to hide stealth reparations by the rural black vote scheme that had been hatched? It's provable. I have no problem going on CNN, ABC News, and having Ben Jealous and Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. You bring the best of the organized left, and they want to call me a racist for pointing out their words. They're the ones who pitched this to people in the churches and at fish fries throughout the late 1990s, the early 2000s, all the way up to last month, where we went undercover into a black church where the head of the Black Farmers Association, Thomas Burrell, is still teaching. At this point, it was 150 people at this church, how they can fraudulently sign up to get their $50,000 check. I hate to, have gallows humor, but it's so blatant that it's funny. How does Thomas Burrell convince people to get their $50,000 check when these people have never farmed before in their lives? He basically is a preacher, and so he says, he invokes God at the very beginning, and he basically says God wants you to have this money, and basically alludes to slavery and reparations. Then he says Congress wants you to get this money, and the judge wants you to get this money. Pigford was initially supposed to help hundreds of black farmers who were institutionally discriminated against. My days are spent talking with those black farmers who have been trying to get the story out for the last 12 years. They're the most honest people in the world, and they were screwed over not just first by the USDA, but they were used by the class action attorneys as a Trojan horse, and then the thing was diverted. They lost their land. They're getting offsets on their Social Security check. They lost out hugely in Pigford, yet their neighbors who have never farmed a day in their lives were getting $50,000 checks. Now let's get into the mathematics here. I promise you, there is no justification with what has happened, and everything I can say is beyond provable, and I can promise you that behind the scenes, despite the fact that the blogosphere has not seized upon the magnitude of this story, I can promise you that behind the scenes, they're shitting in their pants, and there are consequences going on right now as we know it. Today, Thomas Burrell, who we exposed in the press conference at Pigford by showing the 2 hours in which he teaches people how to defraud the government, how to get the $50,000 check. Some of the class action attorneys in Pigford, who are really bad guys and are making hundreds of millions of dollars off of the taxpayers' back in Pigford, have put a restraining order on Thomas Burrell, who has been doing this for years. Here's the basic math. There were 157 black farmers who entered Pigford. Al Pires, the lead lawyer, that's pretty much all he could find that had pretty good cases against the USDA that he could go forward on. He signed these guys up and said he would represent them, but he went up and negotiated with the USDA, the Justice Department, the Janet Reno Justice Department, and a judge, and crafted a resolution that structurally screwed over the black farmer. In fact, on the Thomas Burrell videos, they teach you that the way to get the check is like baseball, that there are 4 questions that you have to answer, and that if you answer one of those questions wrong, you're not going to get the money. And the first question is, were you a farmer? If you answer in the affirmative that you were a farmer, Thomas Burrell says, you're not going to get your money. So the black farmers were screwed over by their class action attorney. Why? Because Al Pires knew that he was not going to make tens of millions of dollars getting back land for his black farmer clients. We have Justice Department memos that show that the Justice Department excoriated Al Pires for not knowing anything about his own clients' cases. And with 2 weeks to go in the settlement, before the settlement was reached, they created a Track A component that for the $50,000 that allowed for attempted to farmers enter the class. That attempted to farmers standard was so easy that anybody could lie. And they were coached to lie, to say that they attempted to farm, their father attempted to farm, their grandfather attempted to farm between 1983 and 1997, and he teaches them in this session that who's going to know if you're not telling the truth? You're going to have to make a decision, but God wants you to have this money. Congress and the judge wrote this in such a way that they want you to get this money. It's all on tape. Pigford is falling apart. 157 black farmers, and it became 957 in the original class. They said that there would only be 2,000 to 3,000 claims in Pigford. In Pigford 1, which is the end of the lawsuit, there were 23,500 claimants, about 10 times more than they thought that there were going to be. In a country, according to the 1997 census, there were only 18,000 black farmers. Here's where it gets sexy. Barack Obama.